Both of these are fantastic 360 cameras, but they both have their pros and cons. And in today's video, I want to compare the Insta360 X5 to the DJI Osmo 360 and help you guys kind of get an idea of which of these cameras might be right for you. So let's get into it. Let's go ahead and dive into the Sparknotes. I know not everyone wants to watch a 15-minute video. So the Sparknotes are, I think the DJI Osmo 360 is a fantastic 360 camera. I've been pretty stoked on this. I honestly was someone who was highly anticipating this little 360 camera to come out. I was always checking online to see updates on it. I'm a big fan of DJI products. I'm filming on an Osmo Pocket 3 right now. I own DJI drones. I own the Action 5. I own a lot of DJI products. So I was really stoked about this camera. However, I do think that for me personally, the Insta360 X5 is still the better 360 camera for me. Now, if you want to know in detail how I got to that decision, I am going to put chapters down here, and I am going to go into further detail throughout this video. However, I am just going to put the Sparknotes right here on the screen with the reasons why I prefer the Insta360 X5 and where I do really like some features and things about the DJI Osmo 360. So go ahead and screenshot this if you want, or just kind of look at it while I'm sitting here yapping. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive in a little further. A few things that I did want to mention before we dive any further into this video. One, there are going to be affiliate links up here in the cards as well as down in the video description. If you decide to purchase one of these cameras after watching this video, I would appreciate it if you did use that affiliate link. I will give a small kickback at no additional cost to you. It does help fund the road trips that y'all like to watch over here on the channel. So thank you in advance if you do. The other thing that I did want to mention is that Insta360 did send me the Osmo 360. Now, they also know upon publishing this video that I'm going to be ragging on the X5 a little bit in this video. And I'm also going to be praising the DJI Osmo 360. They wanted me to be completely honest with you guys. They don't have a say in what I'm going to be saying in this video. The only bias that you guys are going to find in this video is that this is a review video solely based around using these cameras for motorcycling. That is how, as many of y'all know, I use 360 cameras. I like to use them to record my rides. So the bias that you're going to find in this video is going to be based on how I personally prefer to use 360 cameras, which a lot of y'all really like the way I use them in my videos, which is probably why you're watching this one. So let's go ahead and get into the details. Looks like a little stormy storm is rolling in over here, so I'm going to try and go through this as fast as possible for y'all. Starting with a quick size comparison, as I mentioned in that bulleted list earlier, I do prefer the size of the Osmo 360 over the X5, and this shouldn't be a surprise for you if you watched my X5 review video where I talked about the size of the GoPro Max and the fact that I preferred the size of the GoPro Max over the X5. So if you look at the GoPro Max compared to the DJI 360 camera, they're pretty similar in size. They're pretty tiny compared to the X5. When you have this mounted on your handlebars, it is pretty obvious it is there. It just sticks so straight up. And one thing that you guys have probably noticed is that I like to mount a camera on my chin sometimes and get some riding point of view shots. Whenever I do that with this camera, it's mounted on a clip basically like this in front of my face. And the Osmo 360 is lightweight, more lightweight than the X5, I should say. And it's just easier to have on your helmet. You don't notice it as much. And some people say, well, why don't you just put, an Action 5 or, the Insta360 Ace Pro 2 on there? And yes, I could use one of those cameras, but one of the reasons that sometimes I like to use a 360 camera on my helmet instead of just a regular action camera is that I love to be able to get vertical and horizontal footage at the same time so that I can get YouTube footage as well as stuff for Instagram and Facebook and other social media platforms. That might not be a big deal for you, but that is something that I personally like to do. And that is why I do prefer the smaller size of this camera. And just in general, it's a little more inconspicuous than having this huge thing sitting on your handlebars or the front of your helmet. Now, another thing about just the helmet mount, you can get an extra mount to turn the X5 sideways on the front of your helmet. However, it's just another thing you have to buy. If the X5 had like a quick mount or something on the outside of it, just built in, that would be awesome and I would love that. However, it only has the one that's on the bottom of the camera. So it's not a huge deal, but I do really like the size of the Osmo 360. Another external feature that I want to talk about with these cameras, and it's a win for Insta360, is going to be its replaceable lenses. Overall, I've had this camera now since April. I can't remember, March, April, a while. And I've been using this thing nonstop. This is what I've been recording pretty much all my YouTube videos and other things you've seen online with. And I haven't scratched the lenses. They've been great. I don't baby this thing too much. I mean, maybe more than other people, I will say that. Some of y'all are really rough on your stuff, but I haven't had any issues. The lenses aren't scratched. They've been great. And you've probably seen plenty of people trying to smash their lenses with hammers online at this point, since this camera's been out for a few months. And yeah, these are just super durable lenses. Insta360 did a great job on the X5's lenses, especially since they're replaceable. And I think that that is really where DJI, unfortunately, just kind of, came to a loss with this camera, is that they didn't come out with that technology on their Gen 1 360 camera. If this camera had replaceable lenses, I think that they would have a little bit more run for their money, because that is just such a nice feature. Now you can send this in to DJI, spend I think $25 per lens and get them replaced. However, you are going to have to deal with shipping a camera out and getting it shipped back, and it's just a whole process rather than just being able to get a kit to be sent to your house and you can do it yourself in 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and talk about image quality next, because I do feel that that is a big topic for a lot of people. I know that for me, when I'm buying cameras, that is one of the top things I'm considering when buying one, because if I'm going to spend money, I want better image quality, right? Anyway, so I will say it's kind of a tie. You really got to look at the footage pretty closely depending on the situation and depending on how you're shooting. I typically shoot at 8K 30 frames a second, and that's the setting that I used on both of these cameras for the most part while I had them. I will say that I left the X5 in a standard bitrate and I moved the DJI over to a high bitrate just to kind of see how they would compare. And you would think, because the Osmo shoots 10-bit and it also has a larger sensor in it, you'd think that this camera would push out the better video quality. However, I personally felt that I found the Insta360 X5 footage to be better quality in most situations. I will say that the night footage coming out of the DJI did seem to be a bit better, and that is just in standard profile video mode. That's not in the super night, night vision mode that these cameras have. I don't even know what it's called, to be honest. But anyway, I am going to put a bunch of footage in next so that you guys can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about and kind of make a decision for yourself. And I will label the footage for each of these cameras accordingly. Let me know down in the comments which one you think pushes out better image quality. I really think it kind of depends on the scenario. I will say that in some cases, the DJI definitely pushes out better colors. Sometimes things look a bit more muted on the X5, but it's not hard to boost the saturation and fix that, or the contrast. However, I do think that the X5 does push out slightly crispier footage overall, and that is why I do prefer this camera. But everyone has a different opinion on that, so let me know what you guys think from the footage I showed y'all. So that storm finally hit, and it rained for an entire 3.5 minutes. The temperature dropped 20 degrees, and here we are, finishing the rest of this video. So the bike's in the garage. I'm not pulling it back out to have a pretty backdrop. But anyway, let's get back to talking about these cameras. So the next thing on my list to talk to y'all about is smart controls and like internal tech kind of stuff. I'm not a super techie person, but it's just something I did want to briefly touch on in this video. They both, I want to say, now that there has been a firmware update on this, I believe the Osmo does offer like a twist to shoot. They both offer voice control, and they both offer the gestures if that's something you like to do. I every now and then use the voice control features to say, you know, hey, Insta360 turn off or turn on. I loved that on my GoPro Max, but it's not a make or break for me with cameras. I'm not that techie, so that's not something I wanted to touch a lot on, but it is features that you can find in both of these cameras. Up until I want to say last week, this camera did not have twist to shoot, so that was something where the Insta360, you know, won for some people, but I don't really care either way. Now, something that is important to me that, you know, can be a make or break for me sometimes with buying camera gear is battery life. And the Insta360 X5 has way better battery life than the Osmo. And, you know, maybe in the future with some firmware updates that will improve with this camera, who knows? But for right now, the X5 blows it out of the water. I will tell y'all that when I'm filming YouTube videos, I take an extra battery with me to go film a video for a day. But I can usually film an entire YouTube video with just some riding footage, you know, riding around. In one day, I don't even go through a whole battery. I do take an extra just in case, but I usually don't go through a whole battery. Alternatively, with this little thing, I would probably go through at least 2 batteries. Pretty much every time I went through 1 battery with this camera, or almost 1 battery, I was at like 1.5 to 2 batteries for this guy. So yeah, Insta360 definitely wins the battery battle. Apparently the rain's not gonna stop. But I do want to finish this video today, so let's keep going. The next thing that I wanted to talk to y'all about that kind of has to do with the battery life too is camera ecosystems. And that is where, if you are already using DJI products, I do think that this is a win for DJI, is to stick with the DJI ecosystem. So if you're someone, you know, kind of like myself in some capacities, it all depends on personal preference. I will preface this with that. You know, if you're someone who shoots with solely DJI products, you have the Osmo Pocket, you have a DJI drone, you have the Action 5. This is a really nice thing to add into its little camera ecosystem because it uses the same quick release mounts as the Action 5, which is really nice. Unfortunately, if I'm using a quick release mount for my X5, it's not going to fit in the Osmo, which is unfortunate. However, another nice thing about this is that it does shoot in D-Log. So if you're someone who shoots in D-Log picture profiles on all of your DJI products, it also will do that on this camera. So you can color grade everything super nice and all the colors will match and it'll look great. Me, on the other hand, sometimes I shoot on DJI stuff, sometimes I shoot on Sony stuff. I mix and match so much stuff. It's just a pain. But anyway, the last thing on that same topic, speaking of camera ecosystems, is that the DJI Osmo360 uses the same batteries as the Action 5 Pro. I have the Action 5 Pro, I don't use it very often, but I did realize that I basically have 2 of those little battery packs that carry 3 of them around. So that is nice. If you're someone, you know, who maybe has an Action 5 Pro and you'd want to add this to your camera setup, that is pretty nice that they use the same batteries because, for example, if you use the X5 and you also have an Ace Pro 2, they don't use the same battery, so you have to carry around all these extra batteries with you rather than just one little battery pack that you can constantly recharge on the go. So yeah, if you're someone who likes to stick to camera ecosystems, personally, I think that the DJI camera ecosystem is a little bit more expansive and has a little bit more of a better product offering, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but that's very preferential to the person using the camera. So one of the things that y'all did ask me about specifically over on Facebook and Instagram when I put a poll out the other day was asking about microphones and if you can use external mics with either of these cameras. And again, that is where the X5 does win, because while both of these cameras do hook up 2 external mics that you can use the DJI mics with the DJI, you can use the little Insta360 mics with the Insta360. The X5 does connect to the Cardo headsets, so if you're someone like me who uses one of the Bluetooth comms from Cardo, I use the PackTalk Pro. Technically, yes, you can hook this up to your Cardo and then you can talk to people while you're riding, you know, kind of make a motovlog and record your audio that way. I don't really do that stuff, but it is an option, and if that's something that you're interested in, that is something that you should know about both of these, is that this one at this moment in time does not connect to Bluetooth headsets, but the X5 does. So these last couple of things were actually like the biggest topics that y'all wanted me to talk about in this video whenever I polled y'all on Facebook as well as on Instagram. ease of use, user interface, as well as the editing software for the apps and the desktops and all of that, that is what y'all were most interested in. So let's go ahead and talk about some of that stuff, starting with user interface. So overall, when you're scrolling through the menus on both of these cameras, I think they're both really easy to navigate and they're easy to use. If you use DJI products, you'll feel right at home with the Osmo360. It's the same menu style as the Osmo Pocket as well as the Action 5, so you'll be fine. Same over here on the X5. If you've used Insta360 products, it'll be very familiar to you over here as well. Now, externally, ease of use, there are a couple things here where the X5 just wins. So there are these quick capture buttons, and this is how I turn my camera on and off. I've talked about this in my X5 review video. I prefer to just click this little quick capture button. It starts recording in my saved setting, and then it basically records until I turn it off. The DJI has the same thing. You can see the little button here. However, it is harder to press that little button when you have motorcycle gloves on, and I felt like when I was testing this camera out, I constantly thought that I would press the button and then I'd realize, a few minutes later when I, went to double check that it was recording, that it wasn't. So it didn't register my finger when I went to press the button. So that right there, ease of use externally to just get the camera started, definitely the X5 wins for me. So the second thing and the last thing for user interface that irks me about the DJI that makes the Insta360 X5 just the better camera for me is when you're recording, there's this little red dot on both sides of the camera, and that lets you know that you're recording and that your camera's on, because more than likely your screen's going to turn off at some point. You're not going to be able to really know. The DJI is currently recording, and if this screen is facing you on your bike, you would have no clue because there's no red dot. There's only a red dot on this side. So that's a little frustrating. I don't know. They should have put a red dot on this side, and that's all I'm going to say there. So X5 wins for user interface overall. So I have found one software issue with the DJI so far, and it doesn't really like motorcycle vibrations, which is kind of an issue when you're thinking about buying a camera to have on your motorcycle. So I noticed that when this was mounted to my Lowrider ST, which vibrates quite a bit, the screen kind of gets all crazy and it doesn't know if it wants to be like in vertical mode or horizontal mode. And I tried to record it to show y'all, so I'll put some of that stuff right here on the screen, but that's definitely a concern for me if I was going to be buying this camera, because to me that makes me think that the camera is going to like internally disintegrate if it can't even handle just like existing on my handlebars. It would do that when the bike was sitting, stationary, just in neutral warming up. It would do it at freeway speeds. It didn't matter. It just couldn't handle the motorcycle's vibrations and the screen would get super glitchy. So that's definitely an issue. Last but not least, I do just want to touch on the app editing experience as well as the desktop editing experience, because y'all had a lot of questions about it, which is very fair because sometimes 360 footage can be a little cumbersome or overwhelming to deal with. It is an extra step to edit. However, I will say that is where this kind of turns into like preferential, choice here. Personally, for me, I don't like the Insta360 phone app. I think it's over-engineered. It's overwhelming when I open it, and I feel like I personally struggle to edit footage on the app. I can do it. It's just not my favorite phone app I've ever used. I think I talked about this in the last video too, that I had actually preferred the simplicity of the GoPro phone editing app for the GoPro Max, and that I was struggling with the Insta360 app. Well, it's been 6 months and I'm still struggling, so that hasn't really changed. It's just a little too technical and I wish it was just simpler. Anyway, the DJI app for the phones is pretty simple. So if you just like to pull little clips here and there, I think you'll really like this. It's been pretty simple for me to use so far. However, if you're someone like me and you like to put stuff on a desktop, because maybe you like to edit YouTube videos or something else, I do not like the DJI desktop app so far. It is cumbersome. It's just not good. So, and I'll just leave it at that, just to keep this kind of short. The Insta360 desktop app, though, honestly is great. I think it's really easy to use. It's pretty simple, and it also exports footage really fast, which is also really helpful, even giant file sizes. So yeah, I've definitely, like, if it came down to it, I would pick the Insta360 just off the software. But again, that is for right now in August of 2025. We'll see what DJI comes up with in a few years. as they come out with next generations of this camera. But for now, if you're thinking of buying one of these cameras, those are my opinions. So yeah, with all of that being said, I do really like the quality that comes out of this. I've been pretty stoked on this camera. I don't think you'll be upset if you buy this camera, but overall, for all the extra features that you do get and the reliability, the durability, like I mentioned, that kind of software glitch I noticed, I do think the X5 is still the king of 360 cameras for now. This has been a fantastic camera and I've been so stoked on it. You guys have been stoked on it, seeing footage in my videos. So yeah, I think the footage kind of speaks for itself on that one, and then just, you know, overall usability. But these cameras are also priced basically the same. So that is the other reason why I think for the price, if you're going to spend $550 on one of these cameras, you should get this one, the Insta360 X5. But I think that's going to do it for this video. Like I said, if you want to purchase either of these cameras or any extra accessories for your camera, be sure to use the affiliate link that is linked up here in the cards, as well as down in the video description. I've talked too much in this video, I can totally tell. Let me know if you guys have any other questions down in the comments below. But until the next one, I will see y'all on the road. Later, y'all.